Okay. Yeah, my mic. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Rob Champetti. I have the privilege of serving as chair of the Newburyport ZBA. This is the hearing for November 14th, 2023. Our published start time being 7 p.m. It being 7 p.m., we're going to go ahead and open our meeting. I always begin with a quick introduction of our board members. We establish a quorum. A quorum essentially is just establishing that we have at least 4 voting members, which is the minimum required in order to conduct the business of the ZBA this evening. We'll then go ahead and establish who our voting members are. I think we have one absentee this evening, who is Ms. Lynn Scow, one of our associate members. She's not with us this evening, so Ms. Patricia Pecknick, to my immediate right, will be serving at voting. Yeah, we have 5, but there's 1 recusal, I believe. So I'll go through the applications, although we have only 2 and 1 continuation of a minor modification, which we'll do first. Basically, I'll call the roll now, and members of the ZBA just kindly answer present or here. Okay, Mr. Stephen Delisle.
Here.
Ken Swan. Here. Mr. Walter Shannon.
Here.
Mr. Gregory Bennett.
Here.
Ms. Liz Scow is absent, and Ms. Patricia Pecknick.
Here.
And we have Rob Champetti on here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members present. We do have a quorum. Our voting members this evening will be Mr. Delisle, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Shannon, Mr. Bennett, and myself. In one of the applications, we have a recusal, in which case the voting, and which one is, who has to recuse themselves on one of the applications?
I don't believe anyone's recused for 22 Market Street. Dr. Patricia Pecknick was a voting
Right.
member last
So-
meeting, so she would be the voting member.
Thank you. So the voting members on the minor, so the 5 voting members for the 2 applications before us, 99 Ferry Road and 66 Prospect Street, will be myself, Mr. Delisle, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Shannon, and Mr. Bennett. For the minor modification continuance on the matter of 22 Market Street, the continuation of voting members will be myself, Mr. Delisle. Myself, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Shannon, Mr. Bennett, and Ms. Pecknick. Okay, calling the, we have called the roll, we've established our quorum and our voting members. Essentially, what we'll do is I'll begin by reading the first application, which is the request for minor modification. It's a continuation. We'll then hear from the continuation of presentation from the applicant and Attorney Shanes on behalf of the applicant. We'll then get into our public hearings in the sequence that you see them on the agenda. With that, I will go ahead and just announce the continuation of the minor modification. This is a request for a minor modification on 22 Market Street, matter having been continued from our last ZBA hearing. Which date was our last hearing? 24th. Thank you. Just taking a moment to introduce Ms. Gretchen Joy, our keeper of the minutes, Mr. Andy Port, our planning director, and Ms. Caitlin Sullivan, our city planner. Okay, with that, may we continue to hear from the applicant, Attorney DeShanes. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. For the record, Douglas DeShane from Finner and Nicholson, here representing the Market Street Inn LLC. With me this evening, Mr. Ben Legary from Market Street Inn LLC. You'll recall we were here last, we were seeking a minor modification to essentially allow us to use a reproduction window in restoring the inn, as opposed to restoring and reusing the existing windows. You'll recall we discussed a number of issues with respect to the application of codes and the application of safety. And probably one of the biggest things that came out of that meeting was a discussion of our need or the suggestion that we went in and meet with the Historic Commission to discuss the modification so that they could provide a recommendation or a statement to the board regarding the use of the reproduction windows. And we were the Historic Commission was great in allowing us to meet with them before this hearing. I think we had a very productive meeting. I think, and I have to be honest, that at the end of the day, I think, the discussions and analysis of code was not necessarily the driving force of our discussion with the Historic Commission, but rather, I think it really came down to safety, liability, and risk. We discussed with the Historic Commission our original commitment to restore the windows. But as you'll know, we ran into some issues with whether they could be restored in a manner to provide safe, effective, and long-term egress. And so we went through a lot of iterations in trying to figure that out. But at the end of the day, it was deemed that it was in the best interest, certainly of my clients, with respect to liability, risk, and insurance, wanting to ensure that their folks who come and stay at the inn are going to be safe, that we wanted to do the reproduction window. So we did talk with the Historic Commission. I believe the chairman was kind enough to send a letter of recommendation to the board, in which I think they agreed that in this particular instance, in light of the safety issues, that it would be acceptable to use the reproduction windows. Although we did discuss the fact that in not being able to restore the other windows, and therefore to really keep things as historically correct as possible, my clients offered to do a cedar shake roof on the building in light of the use of the reproduction windows. I think that was well received by the commission. They did agree, I believe, that it would make for a better reproduction of the whole building, so to speak, or the protection of the historical character. We also talked about the windows themselves, whether they could be provided and made available to someone who wants to restore them or reuse them. And my clients are certainly wholeheartedly in agreement with that. They'd love to see them reused and repurposed if someone can do that. So they will be made available to the Historic Commission or to the board, or whatever city entity would like to help us in finding a new home for them. So with that, we're happy to answer any other questions, but I think at the end of the day, it really came down to our discussions and with the Historic Commission, and they were great in working with us.
All right, thank you, Attorney Shanes. And members of the ZBA, before I sort of go further in this, I want to make sure everyone has had an opportunity to read the commentary and the summary of the decision of the Newburyport Historic Commission with respect to the applicant's revisitation to them with these changes in mind. Has anyone not seen that? No? All right, great. With that, was there anything you wanted to add, Counselor, before we just close?
No, if I have any questions, I'm certainly here, and Ben's here to answer any further questions you might have.
I'm just going to, in the interest of just sort of lapping the room, we'll open up public comment to see to the extent to which anyone this evening may have any commentary, and we'll just ask Sullivan to go ahead and put that slide up on public comment if you could. I'll first start with a show of hands, anyone in the room, and then we can go online to the extent we have anyone viewing via Zoom. Seeing no hands, going once, going twice. All right, I'm gonna close, well, I'll keep this open and we'll go to anyone online who, among the attendees, if you're listening online and wish to simply be heard, just feel free to raise your hand. We will ask you to unmute your mic. We'll do the same and just give us your name and feel free to share any comments you may have. I only see 2 attendees and I see no hands online, so going once and twice, I will close the public comment. Thank you, Kevin. And we will go into questions from the board. Let's see, why don't we start, Scott, we'll start here. I'm sorry, Ms. Beck.
I don't have any questions.
No, great, Mr. Beck.
Just one, Attorney DeShane, I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to look at the conditions proposed by the NHC. Have you seen those?
Yes,
Okay.
we
And,
discussed them at length.
okay, and the specific wording in condition 1 regarding the window, et cetera. I just don't want
Yes.
to unintended.
That we were gonna use the the mountain.
Green Mountain
Green Mountain windows, that they are the same size, same shape. Yes,
Just
sir.
want to make sure.
We've read them, yeah.
Thank you. That's all I.
Great, Mr. LeBlanc.
I have no questions.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
No questions.
And, Mr. Swanton.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I appreciate, I was the one who kind of suggested you go to the historic commission, and I appreciate you going there. As you probably, I think you know, I sat in on the meeting. It's funny, I came down here looking for the meeting and I found that it was Zoom only. I thought I was back in the COVID era, but anyway, I went home and listened to it online. And it was, I appreciate you going there because, you know, we see a lot of things in the historic district here on the zoning board. But we can never really talk about the historic attributes, except with the DCOD, demolition control over the district. A proposal like this, well, we're supposed to think about it. And get the input from the historic, so I really appreciate you going there, thank you. I guess, my question is, Mr. Bennett talked about the wording around the Green Mountain, windows. Also, I think you had offered several times to put cedar shakes on the roof, and then you mentioned again tonight, I assume you're still fine with that. Also, a topic had come up at the Historic Commission, I think somebody from the Preservation Trust was curious about the front door. I also thought you addressed that very well that night. And I assume are you still looking at trying to figure out if there's like still ancient windows up there underneath or whatever? Could you just comment on that?
Sure, that was part of the original meeting we had with the Historic Commission, I believe was part of their recommendation earlier. While they believe that the structure of the entrance is, you know, historic and, I guess it's odd that the panel above the window is solid. And there's a question of whether there could have been or would have been a transom,
Or still are?
or it still could be there. And we had agreed to take that apart and to restore the window.
It's not still there,
It's not there.
but I think with the Green Mountain Window Company, I can get a transom and make it back. So, yeah, unfortunately it wasn't there.
Oh, well, I was saying, you never know what's under there.
Yeah,
We're talking early 1700s. That's
I know.
a old structure,
Been a while.
even for Newburyport, though.
But it will have one when we finish.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate it. No, I really applaud you for going there and going through the steps and, appreciate their input. So that was really my only question. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, I don't have any further questions either, and just to echo, Mr. Swanton's comments. I appreciate the extra time and the effort, and you know, this is a granular process and it is an endeavor of inches, you know, that sometimes takes the time it takes. But the result in our built environment lasts a generation or more, so the extra inches and minutes and time that we, you know, spend now is for, it sounds overly poetic, but it's kind of for the, you know, the best result and posterity of our built environment, and these preservation efforts are greatly appreciated when we can sort of see them through and just take our time. So thank you for taking the time to do that. If there are no further questions, we can just go into deliberations. And I'll begin with Mr. Swanton on what first we'll need as a board just to make a determination or at least opine on whether or not we believe it's a minor modification, and then your thoughts on whether it meets with your approval. We can just kind of go around the room on that mark.
Well, I was concerned last week about not having input from the Historic Commission on something like this, but we have it now and they're supportive. And the applicant has indicated around the condition of right windows and cedar shingle roof and whatever else. And so took a little extra here, but I'm glad we've got through all that, and I now can support that this is indeed a minor modification.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Agreed. I feel it's a minor modification and I will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle.
I would concur that, based on where we are, you know, I think that you're calling it a minor modification after all the process that we've gone through, really, it'll work here. Yeah, I can concur.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, based upon the extensive examination of this application, I too can agree that it's a minor modification at this point. I would say that I will approve it, and I think the approval and the efforts of all have resulted in an appropriate balance of some significant interests, including the historic interest of the building, the safety and functionality of the windows and the structure, and also the importance of the reuse of this structure, which I applaud the developer in that respect. So for all those reasons, I think this is a process that worked very well, and we can approve it as a amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett, and Ms. Peck.
Yeah, likewise, and I don't know if you know Norris Architectural
I
Salvage.
did know, yeah, that was
They
my,
would love to get
if
those.
I can't find anybody, that was the first thing I mentioned.
Yeah,
was
because
that,
people go there all the time, like down the right to find
Oh, yeah.
one
Yeah.
of those. So, thank you.
Perfect, yeah, that'll be where it goes if you can't find it.
Great.
Yeah, great. I concur. I agree. I think Mr. Bennett's comments, it's a process that seems to have worked. So, again, my appreciation and also I think our collective board appreciation to the Historic Commission and Chair Richards for the additional effort to revisit this, offer their advisory opinion, give us the the detail and the expertise that we as sort of fellow volunteer citizen boards rely upon buying between each other. That's a functional board of functioning members when we can aspire to actually, get this information, seek the information, get what we're looking for, and endeavor to make a better decision with it. So thank you to those folks as well. Unless there's any further deliberations, I will just look for a motion. And if whoever wishes to craft a motion, I think there's some conditions that should be carried forward, however you wish to frame them.
I'll make a motion to approve this as being a minor modification at 22 to 24 Market Street. With a couple of conditions. One is that the replacement windows as represented to the Newburyport Historical Commission on 9/3/23, the Green Mountain window and door company milestone double hung, matching the existing windows in size, operation, and mutton pattern, and having 3D exterior mutton profile shall be permitted in lieu of existing windows previously called out to be preserved, quote, preserved, repaired, and refinished as required, unquote. Location shall match previously approved plans. The second thing is the applicant shall make a best effort to salvage the existing historic windows for reuse. The applicant shall notify the Office of Planning Department, Office of Planning Development, once the windows are removed and potentially available for reuse. And I would add number 3, that the applicant, as proposed, is moving to a cedar shaped roof. And that's my
Great.
motion. Something else.
Gretchen, did you? Yeah, sure you did. Excellent. All right, motion's made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Motion's made by Mr. Swanton, seconded by Mr. Bennett. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Channing.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
I am not voting in this.
Sorry, Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
And Ms. Becker.
Yes.
And Rob Champetti. I vote yes. That is 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries, and the minor modification with conditions is approved. Good luck.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for your patience. All right, moving on to our first matter, we're gonna open our public hearing. We have 2 matters on public hearing this evening. The first of the 2 is the application of David Reisler Bruce and Caroline Ogilvy, care of Lisa Mead Tallerman and Costa LLC for the property located at 99 Ferry Road. This is a special permit for nonconformities. The applicant seeks all necessary permits, permissions, and applications and approvals to demolish the rear portion of the structure and construct a new rear addition that extends an existing nonconformity side yard setback and adds greater than 500 square feet on a lot with nonconforming frontage. So you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Lisa Mead Tallerman Costa, 33rd Street in Newburyport. And with me here this evening is David Reisler Bruce, and Caroline, I don't think is here, but maybe watching. And Scott Brown, the architect on the project, and my colleague Ben Taylor. And so if you go to the next slide, please, thank you. So David and Caroline proposed to remove the existing rear addition and construct a new addition and deck in the rear of their single-family home at 99 Ferry Road. The property is in the R1 zoning district. There's no Form B, nor is the structure in the district data sheets. However, because the structure is dated to 1879, and there was a roof line change proposed on the rear of the structure, we did go to the Historic Commission for demolition delay. The Historic Commission last week approved the property is historic, obviously, but then lifted the delay and approved the plans that you see before you this evening. So the property is non-conforming for frontage. Since it's in the R1, 125 feet are required. The property has 110.54. The front yard setback is 26.8, where 30 is required. And the right side setback is 7.5 feet, where 20 feet is required. So those are the non-conformities. Otherwise, the property has significant area and frontage and setbacks, not frontage, significant area and setbacks. The left side setback is 70 feet. The rear setback is 512 feet. Can't say that very often in your report. And the property includes 72,590 square feet, where 20,000 feet are required. So the lot conforms to both lot coverage and open space and the parking requirements, including lot coverage is at 3.3% and open space is at 93.3%. So as I said, David and Caroline proposed to remove the existing rear addition. If you go to the next slide, please. And construct a new rear addition and deck on the back. This will extend the right side non-conformity, which is currently 7.5, but it won't extend it to the same extent. It's going to be at 9.4 and 10.3, so it won't be at 7.5. So you can see on the top of the plan here, the site plan, that upper part of the property, you can see the existing 7.5 at the front right corner, and then as it goes back, it's not to the same extent. And as again, this is only a portion of the property because it carries on beyond to the left. But in order to get the site plan to the size you wanted it, we only show the front portion of the property since there's nothing in the back that's affected. But you see the existing house, you can see the existing deck and addition on the back. It's grayed out, it's going to be removed, where the new addition and proposed deck will be added. There's a garage that exists on the left side of the property as well. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Scott to have him review the proposed architectural drawings.
Oh, thank you, Attorney Mead. Scott Brown, the architect for the project. So as Lisa already stated, this is a rather large, very long lot and one of the largest that I've worked on here in Newburyport. And it can certainly accommodate an addition of the length that we're proposing. So the next 4 slides, this is a format that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with at this point in time. We've got the existing condition drawings at the top, proposed drawings at the bottom. So this is a house that's had a lot of renovation work done to it over the years at various points in time. And a lot of those renovations have added to the functionality of the house, particularly on the upper floors. But none of those renovations have really addressed the functionality of the first floor. So the first floor is rather chopped up, a lot of smaller spaces. So this project is really about improving the functionality of that first floor in the form of a kind of single-story addition off the back of the house to kind of give them a larger sort of entertaining space and a mudroom. So what we're looking at here is that, you know, the front elevation of the house. Perhaps the first thing that sort of jumps immediately off the page are those dormers at the roof. You know, those were added to the house in 2016. They've been very flat pitch and perhaps are a little bit of a lesson in terms of how not to do dormers, but they do, in their defense, they do add some functionality to the house. Those were done prior to our clients, you know, owning the house. So really the only thing that we're doing on the front elevation here is that we're swapping out windows in that front left corner, perhaps I could call it like a sunroom. That was enclosed sort of sometime in the mid-80s. So I think it's a time to has the original windows, so I think it's time to sort of upgrade those. So we're proposing to remove those windows and upgrade them with something that's sort of a little bit, more modern looking. Next slide, please. So, here we're seeing the existing left side elevation, almost with our back to the, barn on the top. And on the bottom, it's our proposed, elevation. You can see immediately up to the far left, we are, proposing a new deck. This is about the same size as the deck that they currently enjoy. And immediately to the right of that deck, is our first floor addition. This is intended to be sort of like a living room, with a cathedral ceiling. And that dormer there is gonna, let some light into that space. And between that box and the main house, that's our rear entry where our mudroom is located. And then this is in the location where, we're proposing to sort of demolish a rear L, which the Historic Commission approved, a couple of weeks ago. Off to the right there, again, you see those windows that were, modern sort of style windows that we're proposing to put in that sunroom. And then immediately to the left of that, that's actually the front entry to this house. So we're proposing to put a new door in there and a little bit, adding a new, front entry portico roof there to kind of give them a little bit of cover. Down in the lower left-hand corner of the proposed elevation, you'll see some notes indicating some material choices. We're proposing a fiber cement board siding. House is currently sort of a mixture of old wood clapboard with the newer renovation work. Does have the fiber cement, so we think it's an appropriate, since it's already there, we do think it's an appropriate material choice. In terms of windows, we're proposing a clad wood window, which is going to be a higher quality than what's on the house now. I believe they're all vinyl replacement windows. Next slide, please. Two elevations from the back, existing elevation at the top. That's that rear L that we're removing. That's currently clad in wood shingles. Off to the left of that, there's a chimney there, which is not original to the house. I think that was put there at some point in time for a wood stove. And again, at the bottom is their proposed rear elevation, with a glass there opening up to their very, very large backyard and a deck in immediate foreground. There's a couple windows in the existing house on the back gable end that we're trying to work around, trying to preserve and trying to keep this addition as low as we can and away from those windows. Next slide, please. Coming full circle, this is the right side of the house, with its back to the immediate abutters. A lot of this is screened. There's a pretty high privacy fence along this lot line, and really not a whole lot to see here. Next slide, please. Just some existing photos, starting up upper left-hand corner. It's taken from the front right corner. You can see a little bit of a glimpse of that chimney, which I spoke of, which is not original. Again, that's being removed. In this photo, we would see very little of this addition we're proposing. Upper two right photos are, a little bit more, some views at the front. There's that sunroom that I spoke of with those windows from the 80s that we'll be replacing. And lower left-hand corner, this is taken with our back against the barn. Then you can see that sort of what is considered their front entrance immediately in front of us. This is where we're proposing to put a new portico roof. And finally, the two photos in the lower right there showing the sort of deck, rather large deck that we're intending to replace, pushing it farther back in the yard. And I think that was added sort of in 2016 as well. And finally, the next slide, please. Just a couple more photos showing, what this property looks like from across the street. One on the right, taken from the front right corner of the immediate butter, right to the right there. And again, we'll see very little of this addition from this angle, maybe a little bit of roof at best. And then the photo off to the left is beginning to show what sort of like this large backyard looks like. Back behind that, Volvo that's parked in the driveway there, we can see the deck, and that's where our addition is going. Again, Pretty large lot, pretty large yard, pretty private back there, and, you know, this addition isn't gonna be very visible. And, with that, I'll hand it back to Attorney. Thank you.
You can go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. So we have the mind maps here, so you can actually see the full extent of this property. It lines up against the Briggs Ave and Fender's Ave subdivision that was built in the sixties. And then on the right-hand side is actually a City of Newburyport wellhead area. That's owned by the City of Newburyport under the control of the Water Commission. Similarly, across the street on the upper left, that's also City of Newburyport land and related to the back of Mosley Pines. And actually a great walk through there if you've never done it before. And then there's obviously a structure across the street as well. So if you go to the next slide, please. So under section 9, the board needs to make 2 determinations. One, whether or not there's any new nonconformities. And as I explained earlier, there are no new nonconformities. We are extending that sideline, but it's not a new nonconformity. The second requirement is that the board find that the proposed addition is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing nonconforming structure. As Scott indicated here, the lot is very large and can hold this kind of extension off the back. And even though it's a little long, the extension in and of itself is only 631 square feet more than what exists there today. So that's the new square footage of living area that is added to the house. Lot coverage is only affected by 1%. It goes from 3.3 to 4.3%, and open space goes down from 93.3% to 92.3%. So it's very little impact given the size of the property. And while there's somewhat an elongated addition, the design is proposed features different size portions. So it's not one big wall, including 1-story portion connected to the main portion of the existing house that helps break up the massing of the addition. Additionally, the structure will remain shorter than and behind the main portion of the existing structure, having little to no impact on the view of the property from the street. Lastly, in the context of the wider surrounding area, this is much more wooded and certainly less thickly settled than the rest of the city. And this property stands alone as kind of an independent property that exists and continues to exist aside from the subdivision next door. Taking that all into consideration and not worsening the right side setback at all, we believe the board can find that the proposed addition is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. Additionally, I provided to the board 2 letters of support, one from 1 Briggs Avenue and one from 5 Briggs Avenue. And so those are abutters on the left-hand side along that sideline. With that, we request the board approve and issue a special permit for nonconformities to the applicants to allow them to go forward with the addition.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Mead and Brown for the presentation. Closing that portion of the public hearing, we'll go to public comment. And anyone in the room who wishes to speak, feel free to just raise your hand. And seeing no hands, I'll just briefly go online. And anyone listening online via Zoom, if you wish to be heard, just kindly raise your virtual hand. We will ask you to unmute your mic. We'll do the same, and you will have the floor. We only have 3 attendees. Seeing no hands, I will close that portion, the public comment portion of the public hearing, and we'll go into questions from the board, and we'll begin with this one.
Yes, could you put the site plan back up, please, Caitlin? You mentioned you had letters from someone at 1 Briggs and at 5 Briggs. Is 1 Briggs the first one there, right along the ferry?
Yes.
Because this addition is kind of closest to that lot line over there. How about the person in the middle? I guess 5 is the second, the third one in.
Right, 1, 3, 5,
Yes.
right?
You ever hear anything from 3?
Yeah, so the applicants went to 3 as well, the older couple.
Yeah.
They took the plans, they asked questions, and they said thank you, and they didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. This plan also mentions line of conservation restriction, could you just comment upon and
Sure, if you go, if you can go to the My Maps, Caitlin, so as I indicated earlier, Mr. Swan, the city has a wellhead next door. And so there is a 400-foot radius from that wellhead that's called the Zone 1, right? So that exists, but some of it ran into this property. Okay, so this just dates me on this permitting. So, a number of years ago, 2010, the then owner of this property also owned a piece of property down on Merrimack Street to do a 6C. And as you know, before the current 6C was changed, one of the benefits that the city looked for in a 6C is a donation of open space or something like that. And so because the 400-foot radius went into this lot, but the city did not have an easement for it, which DEP wasn't happy about. The then owner of the lot gave a conservation restriction to a significant portion of the back of the lot to the city of Newburyport. So the city could control.
help protect the well? The land?
Correct. So that's on, I have the conservation restriction in the easement here. So I don't know if you can see this or not, but the conservation restriction line, if you go back up to the site plan, starts, at that diagonal area there and then covers the entire back of the lot.
I see.
And on here, you can see the arc that comes through here for the Zone 1 protection, right?
I see.
So where the city at the time couldn't control Zone 1, that conservation restriction allowed them to do it. So none of this is done within that conservation restriction area.
All right, no, the rest of it's all very clear. I have no other questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I just had one question. It has to do with I think the south side elevation, if you can pull that up, shows it's at the fourth picture down, keep going down. Oh, wait, that is it. No, you had it. I'm sorry. All right, so the top is the existing, and it has that little tiny small roof with the chimney on it. And it's, I don't know, it's half the size of the main house. And then the new addition is twice the size of that little addition. Is that little addition remaining in place as is? That little tiny, I call it a breezeway.
It's being removed. I mean, that's.
Being removed?
Yeah, that's what we.
Okay.
Needed to go to historic commission. to
Okay,
receive permission.
so that piece in its entirety will be gone,
Correct, yes.
and you'll reattach the new addition to that. Got it, okay. Understood, thank you. No other questions.
Very good, Mr. Dewan.
A question with regard to the addition versus the piece that Mr. Chagnon was speaking of. What's the difference in length between those two?
We can clearly see that on the site plan there. Caitlin, if we can zoom in there a little bit. So I think if we were to, there's sort of like a little bit of a neck, between the main body of the house and, where that node is of the proposed addition, and they're the same length. That neck is the same length as that existing rear L that we're removing.
Okay, but
Does that
so,
answer your question?
sort of, I think. But the end of the new addition will be how many feet beyond the end of the existing L?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, it's right here, so it's exactly, it's sort of the same length as the existing deck that is there. I don't have the dimension off the top of my head, but that looks like it's about 20 feet plus or minus, yeah.
20 feet from the back wall of the old part of the
Yes.
house to the end of, okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
No questions.
Ms. Beckman.
No, I appreciate Mr. Thorne's question and the
Yeah.
answer to that.
Very good. I too have no questions. So with that, we'll close the question from the board section of our public hearing and go into deliberations. And again, we'll deliberate the special permit for non-conforming criteria, which is, we all well know, is the two-prong evaluation. Mr. Swanton, you want to kick things off for us?
Sure, two prongs. For the first prong, as Attorney Mead said earlier, I guess, are there any new non-conformities? And I don't see any, so I would say there are none. The second prong has to do with whether this is more detrimental to the neighborhood than what's currently there in its non-conforming state. Well, as I look at this, it's a large house on an unusually large lot. This is a significant addition, but it's in the back, it's one story, it's modest compared to the size of the house that's already there. And the coverage of the lot is tiny because it's such a huge lot. So I don't think this is detrimental to the neighborhood, and I can support this application.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts, you know, the existing house being 2,463 square feet with the addition, 3,094. Sounds like a big house, but, you know, when you look at it from the street and even from, Briggs Avenue, you know, it's gonna be hard to see other than the neighbors, and 2 out of the 3 are okay with it.
Yeah.
I can assume the third is okay with it because they're not here opposing it. So I think it's, you know, it's well done, it's in the right place. If it was sideways, you know, we'd probably be looking at it a little differently, because you'd see it from the street and the massing would come into play, but the lot can handle it, it's very well done, and I can support it.
Very good, and Mr. Blount?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, I would be more worried about the length of the extrusion. If the, you know, if there was some sort of, what am I trying to say here? If the neighbors had raised some sort of objection, but under these circumstances, and that would be only because the lot line is so close at 8 feet, maybe 9 feet, as it goes back. But I think because you have, you know, you've gotten the letters of non-objection from the neighbors, and your other sideline is 70 feet, and you've got all this space here, that this will be fine. So I can agree with my colleagues and support this plan.
Very good, and Mr. Bennett?
I agree with the comments of my colleagues. I would simply add that, it hasn't been mentioned, I think it probably has, I think the architectural approach certainly mitigates the scale and massing concerns that might arise otherwise with an addition of the size, but otherwise, but the lot is large, as Mr. Swan, Mr. Shagman, and Mr. Lyle ticked off the factors that I think prompt me to vote yes on this.
Very good, and Ms. Beckett?
I would support it as well.
I agree, and I don't need to echo or add to what's already been said, but I feel it's an application that meets the criteria, and certainly I can support it as well. Anything further? No, we'll close the deliberations and go to a vote, and motion, I'm gonna ask you to, you're just closest, so you get to.
The motion man.
The motion man.
I move to approve the special permit for non-conformities for 99 Ferry Road.
Very good, motion's made, motion to approve is made, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon, motion's made and seconded by Mr. Shannon.
Second.
Calling the roll on the motion and second, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
And Rob Champigney, I vote yes, that's 5 in the affirmative, the ayes have it, motion carried, and the application is approved.
Thank you very much.
All right, going to our second and final public hearing this evening. This is the application of Patrick Helfrich. Pardon me if I mispronounced that. Helfrich. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Application 66 Prospect Street. This is a special permit for non-conformities. The applicant seeks all necessary permits, permissions, and approvals from the Newburyport ZBA to construct a 2-story addition in the rear of the property, resulting in an extension of a pre-existing non-conforming setback. Mr. Helfrich, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. This is my first time doing this, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. Okay, awesome. So me and my wife recently purchased 66 Prospect Street. It was our first home. We're very excited to be in Newburyport. I got a couple bullets here, I'll try to go through them quick. So we're expecting our first child in January, which is the reason for the addition. We'd like a little bit extra space. The house has not been occupied for quite some time. We had a pretty big mold issue when we bought the house. Actually, before we were able to secure a mortgage, we had to mitigate that issue. We're writing the commission to request a partial roof line change in the back, and have to continue, there is a side setback that is non-conforming that we'd just like to continue on. We have spoken to a few of our neighbors after reviewing the map. We have not spoken to all of them, but the ones that we did speak to were very positive with the changes and we received no complaints. Our intent is to leave the original structure intact and build an 8 by 21 foot addition off the back. It will be inset from the sides about 2 feet, so it should not be very visible from the street if at all. And actually the roof line is a little bit lower as well. So let's see what else we got here. There is a shed in the yard that we're going to remove, and that will make us conform to the same square footage of the lot with the addition. So there is aluminum siding that is deteriorating and really doesn't look great. We'd like to replace that with a hardy board on the front and the back, and then we'd like to do cedar shakes on the sides. And in summary, I really just want to keep the historical beauty of this thing and just update it a little bit and make sure it blends in with the neighborhood is really our goal here with a little bit of extra space on the back. So here's some existing exterior photos. You can see, moldy front, it is aluminum siding, some's kind of peeled off. And unfortunately, the siding below does not really seem savable. So we'd like to just replace that with the hardy board. There's a concrete stoop out front that's kind of, it's seen better days, as well as the overhang. We did go to historical for this, and they called it historic, but not, the exact wording was they don't think it needs to be preserved. Along those lines, I'm sure I messed that up a little bit. So you can see some of the rot on the interior boards here. It's older home, it's definitely had some water damage. The windows, there's some vinyl upstairs. It's kind of a mixed bag of windows. So we'd like to replace those with a wooden clad window on the exterior, and just kind of better thermal characters, all that, and just make them look a little bit nicer. I mean, the storm shutters on them are in terrible shape as well. So we just like to put a nicer window in there essentially. Some context photos. So our neighbor, which is tough to see, but in the bottom right there, it's kind of what we want to match. He's got the boards on the front and the cedar shakes on the side. That's really kind of the look we're going for, and to try to blend into the neighborhood a little bit here, but more than the aluminum siding anyways. So the zoning matrix, so you can see the shed in the back on the lot there, so that will be removed, and that square footage equals what we'll be adding to the rear addition here. And yeah, so here's the existing, and then should have done these better, like the other guy had them, but so yeah, these things are architect. So you can see the hardy board up front and the bottom there, and the cedar shakes on the side. And there's a few window moves in the front, but more just to make it more uniform looking. And then a lot of the windows on the side stay the same. There's a few additional windows, but they're small. I think that's the end of my slide there, so.
Very good. Well, thank you. We may have some questions for you. Thank you for your presentation. We'll go ahead and close the presentation portion, the applicant presentation portion of our hearing, and we'll go to public comments. Anyone in the room wish to speak in connection with the application? Very few hands, but seeing no hands raised, we'll go to our online. And I see no hands. I see no attendees, so no people, no hands. We'll close public comment and go to questions from the board, beginning with Mr. Swanton.
By the way, the slides are very nice.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Thank you. I've seen a lot of pros come in here with slides that were not as clear, so thank you.
I heard you had hand sketched. From the last meeting?
Yeah,
There were some good examples that I found on the website, or actually, Caitlin showed me on the website, so I followed those as best I could.
Yeah, let's see, as far as questions go, actually, I think you covered everything. I don't have any questions. I live a block and a half away. I go by this house all the time. And, thank you for, dealing with this house.
You're very welcome.
Very good. Mr. Chairman,
Just one question. It looks like the addition is 8 by 21, so 168 square feet. You know how big the house is today, square footage?
It's right under 1,300, I believe.
Okay. So still a small home when you're done.
Yes.
No, I appreciate the fact that you're restoring a home that needs some loving care. The siding has always looked a little tough.
She does need
And
some love.
So God bless you for taking it on. No other question.
very good. Mr. Blisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are you planning on using for the material around for the corner boards and around the windows and that sort of stuff? Just out of curiosity.
We're definitely gonna put some corner boards on there. We would be open, there's no real, I don't really wanna put plastic in there. I don't think it looks very good. I don't know.
I would recommend the
The
AZAC.
AZAC,
Yeah.
okay, I shouldn't have said that, but yeah.
I would recommend that, but I mean, you can still do the pine, but it just doesn't last as long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious. There's other choices too, right? You have a universe of choices to choose from, I would imagine.
Yeah, learning a lot, as I go here, for sure.
Yep, that's all I have for questions.
Great. Mr. Benny.
I have no questions.
Ms. Becker.
Guess my only question is, are you gonna repair the concrete steps? That's one of the things you wanna do.
I would like to, yes.
Okay. My question is, would you maybe consider doing something different with the portico? It's just so bulky and large. It seems out of scale.
Sure.
This has nothing to do with my opinion on whether or not I would approve it. It's always bothered me that portico is just like.
Do you have any suggestions?
Think about it. Yeah. It's just-
We're gonna make it look as good as we possibly can.
Okay, yeah.
For sure.
So large.
It is very
It's too
large.
heavy, it's
It's
disproportionate.
chunky.
to the-
I'm surprised it's still standing.
Yeah.
It's very rotten,
You might look around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Ones that are less.
Yeah,
absolutely. We would definitely like to blend in with the neighborhood and have a little bit more charm to it.
All right, was there anything?
No.
Okay, great. I don't have anything additional to add, although I think it's wonderful you've taken on the restoration of this home as well. So, with that, I'll close the deliberations and we will go to our distinguished motion man to my port side here.
Well, it's a two-pronged thing, as you may have heard in the last application. Are there any new nonconformities? I don't believe there are any new nonconformities. You already have quite a few, but there are no. The next one is it more detrimental to the neighborhood, what you're proposing to do than its current non-conforming state? And not intensifying any of the nonconformities. It's not like you're getting closer to lot lines or anything like that. You're not increasing the coverage, you're actually taking out the shed, so you don't increase the coverage. I think you're definitely not in the spirit of intensifying anything. So having met the two-pronged requirement, I can support this application.
Very good. Ken?
I agree. Everything you said, I can support it as well.
I'm just gonna add.
That's really nice. Yeah.
I'm gonna agree with Mr. Swan, and I can approve it. Yeah, I can support this.
All right, Mr. Cunningham, thank you.
Yes, I can as well. Let's be congratulated for saving what is an important house that
Yeah.
deserves saving.
And Ms. Becker?
yes, likewise.
And I agree as well, Mr. Elbridge, nice job. I will close the deliberations and will ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion. In light of the fact that, the Department of Public Services have not indicated a need to improve the trees or the sidewalk, I think the motion can be quite simple. I move that we approve the special permit for nonconformities for 66 Prospect Street.
Very good. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Very good. Motion's made and seconded by Mr. Shannon, made by Mr. Swanton. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Really appreciate all the help.
Yeah, you bet.
Good luck.
Thank you again for taking on this project.
Well, hopefully it looks good in a few short months here.
I'm sure it will.
You don't have time to go here, but.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Good luck, gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, have a great night. I will close the public hearings of our ZBA hearing this evening and go into our business meeting. The only matter before us is the approval of the minutes of 10/24/2023. Any comments, changes, revisions? And if not, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Great.
I will second that.
And seconded by Mr. Bennett. This is just a voice vote. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes of 10/24/2023 is written, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Non-votes, abstentions? None. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Updates from the chair. I'm gonna defer to Andy if Andy wants to share anything with us.
No, just as mentioned previously, there is a short-term rental just got adopted. We'll get you some more information on that piece of it because there'll be some time before you're seeing applications a few months out at least.
Yeah,
but,
they have the second reading Monday night, right?
yeah, so that's been approved on second reading now. Just waiting for the mayor's signature now, I guess. So yeah, so we'll just get some more information to you, the final versions. Obviously be posted to the website, but you'll have only the investor category that would be coming in here on the mainland. So if you have further questions, let me know, but well, I'm sure we'll get into it if you have further questions once you see the results. But
I've got a question,
Yeah.
and I know I'll wait, because I'll look at, the final, I stopped looking at the language.
Yeah.
Of the revisions until it was actually second read, just because I had to keep modifying what I believed I understood. I'd be like, oh, I got it now, then I draw a pretty picture in my mind, and then I would have to like a research.
yeah,
So I haven't read the final, the second read, which is now the approved version,
right,
assuming nothing's remanded back by the mayor, when they.
correct, right.
So-
We're not expecting a veto overnight, yeah.
So that being said, we're only going to get the investor category and only as to the mainland, correct?
Correct, and there's also a stipulation on the investor category this is on the last minute on the floor, sort of negotiation of terms, but that period of time in which those mainland investors versus those who are, have their primary residence there, the investors can really only exist for a 3-year period. It was originally being proposed at that last meeting as a 6-year term. And then that got reduced during the negotiations amongst councilors to a 3-year term. So essentially, someone coming in for a short-term rental unit special permit would be getting a 3-year term, as a special permit. But the license commission would be getting 3 yearly cycles through the license commission, but after that, it would not be permitted as a use. So that landowner, person who's operating would have to think of other uses that are like long-term housing, so.
Now, what about, we can get into these weeds, but in the event that title changes hands, they get a reset. What about closely held title changes, like from an individual tenants by the entirety to just one of those two tenants by the entirety and an entity?
For the investor category specifically, so
Especially.
we're going strictly off of what's on the state's listing. So whoever is registered at the time, as of February of this year, I think it's February, I forget what the exact date is in February, but February of this year, whoever is the entity at that time at a certain address is the one that's gonna have that
Provision
provision.
restriction.
Yeah,
So we're gonna be playing musical tenancy chairs, I'm sure, right? Like, I imagine it's a little bit creative. I hope not, but I do wanna make sure we sort of manage the expectations of what we're gonna see and how often we're gonna see it. But it looks like it's fairly managed. 3-year
Yeah.
cycle on investor only category.
Yeah.
So we won't be seeing that category come back for re-ups like we do with like 90.
Correct. Realistically, you would only see one cycle and, you know, we try to manage, you know, how many are coming in. Obviously, you're not gonna be expected to handle, you know, a significant number more in one night. And they have the same sort of contextual neighborhood issues for discussion. It's a quasi commercial use in the neighborhood, so you gotta have that kind of. So, but you're gonna have just that influx of at the beginning and presumably not really after that for that domestic category, because the other ones are all permitted as of right, subject to licensing and other conditions.
Will it be the planning office to take initial pass at sort of setting our docket to like manage that flow?
Yes, most definitely. Jennifer, as typical, will be making sure, you know, things are compliant and they're right in the right bucket or category for relief that's needed, right, that they're eligible. They'll be routed on, and then obviously with Caitlin and Diane and I, we would just keep an eye with the agenda and make sure that, you know, Caitlin's constantly touching base with Diane and make sure that what's on the agenda doesn't get excessive, and we know that sort of 5 hearings a night is kind of like where we sort of tend to max out at when, you know,
Right.
it's a
Will
lot.
you also give us some the criteria, so we know when one comes in, are we supposed to decide, like, for example, is it going to be negative for its street or whatnot, and what is, you'll give us the criteria?
Yeah, I mean, just FYI, so the council, there was some discussion around the council's debate about zoning and, you know, Rob was alluding to this, but there were probably, I can imagine at least 100 versions that I've seen and worked with, you know, others and councilors over the years, because it's been like a 3-year discussion of this. But in the end, there was discussion somewhere along the way about having particular conditions that would help to identify, you know, when does a certain threshold get reached where it's a problem for the neighborhood, so to speak, you know, paraphrasing, you know, what's in the zoning that we have to consider for the findings. And in essence, there was a decision or an outcome where there weren't any special provisions put in there, like, you know, so many short-term rental units within so many radius of each other, or how on a given streetscape, you know, you can only have so many. There was no measurement like that was put in, so effectively you have the standard special permit criteria, and you will have to, on your own, as board members, you know, come to a conclusion as to whether or not you think it's more detrimental, and, you know, not more detrimental, I should say, as a non-conformance, but it with the same sort of, you know, issue of detrimental, if you will. I don't know, I think it would be hard to argue that they, where the council has allowed it as a use by, you know, by special permit. It would be, at least as a starting point, might be harder to make the argument that it's not something that's desirable, you know, and, you know, which is one of the criteria that we typically look at right off the bat. I think it might be hard to make the argument it's not desirable, given that the council has essentially determined that to some degree. However, you do have to look at the other criteria, and perhaps more importantly as a board, to determine whether or not it has an impact that is essentially unacceptable. And in that has some contextual location, you know, kind of context to it that you'll have to consider. But the evaluation that the ZBA does, you know, is not significantly more than a standard special permit criteria that you look at there in the zoning ordinance already, because they didn't add anything special here.
I just think before we have to decide one, I can imagine a situation where you have 15 neighbors coming in saying it's detrimental to our street. If the criteria is it detrimental to the residential neighborhood, and you got 15 neighbors saying it is.
Yeah.
It is. Well, I know how you would say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if 15 neighbors say it's detrimental.
Yeah, and I know you and I have had this discussion, I understand that, and that's partly why I realize there's pros and cons to this whole aspect, but that is partly why I happen to agree with, you know, the case I've seen today that points to it as being a quasi-commercial use, because to me, it's actually more commercial in nature than residential, because it's, while it has a residential component, it is essentially like a small sort of hotel, if you will, and that has a transient population, so to me, in a residential neighborhood, the transient population is something we associate with commercial uses, right? So that's the point where I realize as a board, you're gonna have to make some decisions as to whether or not you think that's happened. And then there might be further debate though, you know.
Well, I'm just saying, given this is such a political hot potato, I just think if we're gonna have a string of 50 of these things come in.
Yeah.
Before the first one comes in and we get the first 15 neighbors coming in, I really would like some input from our city solicitor who helped write this thing. As to,
Did they?
I don't know if they did or not, but I'd like some input from them.
Maybe version 11.
They weren't involved for the 3-year period because we had changed the council relatively recently. And they did review it largely as to form and issues that were raising, you know, from a mechanical perspective. They, you know, we were obviously throughout the process discussing the sort of policy level things and this and that. They were chiming in a little bit with that, but for the most part, they're looking to it as to form. So they weren't involved with the whole 3-year process of every aspect that's been debated during that time.
How many are there investor owned that we know of? I mean, that officially, like that are coming.
Yeah, I'm sorry for getting off the top of my head, so I don't wanna misquote the, Jennifer is probably our best estimator of that, if we wanna check with her tomorrow, I'd rather have her chime in, because we've had a
I
whole.
mean, it occurs to me if there are so many
Yeah.
and, you know, you have to put things on the docket. Then the first person on the docket would be easier than the fifth person in the same neighborhood. Can you say like, it's an excessive use in this neighborhood?
This is-
Sorry, you weren't on the docket 2 weeks ago. when
Yeah, and this is, again, without taking a stance per se, this is one of the concerns that I had raised, one way or the other, that we, as the zoning was being, considered and adopted, that it, we make a conscious decision as a city, regardless of what the outcome is, and then the adoption of zoning, conscious decision as to whether or not we're adding any special criteria to benefit the board as guidance from the council. Because now the determination of whether or not it's an excess, let's say for the neighborhood, is one of the criteria. That you'll have to make your judgment call based on, everything in context, if you will, not because there has been any specificity added, and I think the council would probably point to the same, that there is nothing in there that says, only a certain number on the streetscape, or the board,
Right.
The board may determine that, after one on a streetscape, or, a segment, block of the street, or, face of a street, or, somebody within a certain radius of each other, how many, hundreds of feet between each other. There was nothing like that thrown in there, so I think you will have to, each time, that was the part that I was flagging, was at what point does the ZBA know that the excess threshold has been crossed?
Yeah,
Because to your point, if they look all identical, if they're ostensibly identical, it's not clear to me when the board is in a position to then say no to someone if it's ostensibly identical to the one that just came before that was approved.
and there are
So-
two on Middle Street, right? So it's like
Yeah.
whoever's in the door first.
It's a yes.
Seems like it's harder to say no to that than the fourth person on Middle Street. You're like, now this is too
Yeah,
much. And for the neighbors too.
Well, maybe we just say no to the first one, just to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. We'll all be kind of dealing with,
I think we're gonna need to like,
With that,
you know, I think in fairness, we're just gonna need to feel our way through it.
Yeah.
And give feedback as we,
Yeah.
as we feel it, as we see it, that sort of adage, see something, say something.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know any other way.
And the investor has to come here in person, is that my understanding?
or their rep. I mean,
Or
their
obviously,
rep.
yeah, obviously with a,
Yeah.
an attorney coming, for them representing, but basically it's, they're gonna have.
Or they could present via Zoom, just like any other.
They can't.
That's right, yeah, they could be on Zoom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are we gonna, can I ask a question, about the investor class, or grouping or whatever, is that everywhere in the city now, or is it just in certain areas?
that's all the mainland, but they're only allowed in certain districts.
Yeah, so which districts are they
So,
allowed, or is it difficult to?
It's all R1, 2, 3, and the.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, so they changed that dramatically,
They did.
because at first it was
Right.
concentrated.
it was much more
downtown.
constrained, and also the original proposal going back, and I know there was even some comment here from this board about it at the time, because, and I tend to agree with some of the concerns that were raised, because it was allowed, but a lot of it was based on special permits, but everything was requiring special permits, and aside from any policy level questions, which is obviously a separate question, I was partially concerned that this board would not be able to absorb the number of
Yeah,
special
right.
permits that would be coming in if every short-term rental unit, depending on the parameters, and
Yeah,
was coming to this board. I don't think it would have been manageable for this board to do all that.
yeah, we did some early math, and we determined that we
Yeah.
wouldn't be through the first tranche in full.
Before the second tranche.
Before the first approved ones were coming up. for
Yeah.
bid every year.
Right.
Assuming we did, assuming we surrendered two, 3/5 of our agenda, or 2/5 of our agenda, like 2 out of the 5
Yeah.
slots. To a short-term rental special permit, we forecasted
Mhm.
based on the numbers that were known at the time, that it was gonna take like 3.125 years to get through the list.
So with this waterfall about to take place, would this be a good time to discuss changing the way that public comment is done at the meetings to only have live public comment like the way they've done in the city council? I mean, we could still have the hybrid meetings
Yeah.
on Zoom, but
Yeah.
comments would have to be delivered in person. Like, I think we're among the last boards in the state that are taking these hybrid comments.
You'll have to decide as a board how you wanna handle that. Obviously, we'll be responsive to that. It would be good in whatever, if you're going to make an adjustment like that, we'll try as best as, I think would suggest we try as much as possible. We try to make sure that's very clearly noted. So for instance, we send a notice out to folks, and we happen to include that it's a hybrid meeting. Part of this goes back to expectations from the pandemic, but part of it also goes back to the idea of, there was an order of the city council about recording, particularly with the ZBA and the planning board meetings and whatnot. So, there's this expectation essentially beyond the city council as the primary, board that you think of this of, than these two boards, that there's more sort of transparency and visibility of the permitting that's happening, right? So, yeah, so you'll have to decide if you want to eliminate that comment, portion, but
I would take it a step further. I see no reason why the investor applicants don't have to be here in person. That makes no sense to me.
well, if you can have an attorney represent you, I don't know how we,
Here in person, not on Zoom, no Zoom.
For the representative.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Here.
Yeah, well, and again, one other thing that could be discussed is that whole concept of, and I just thrown out there is. And I think I would suggest if we're gonna go this route, that we have further discussions both with the mayor's office and with the city council, in some rep at least of the city council to make sure we're on the same page, probably the president at least. If we're going to eliminate the remote portion and say, and go only back to the in-person, just to make sure, because we have heard messages on both sides of the spectrum, if you will, since, I would say, since the pandemic, of these expectations that are sort of built up with it now, it's sort of part of the regime.
Yeah, but
So,
I would just say to that, like, I think if you go back in your memory banks, you can remember that during the pandemic, those meetings were interminable. They
Yeah.
went on forever because we had every person calling from their bed,
yeah,
making comments. And I think that
Yeah.
the second thing with that though, is there was a decrease in civility in the comments too.
I would disagree. I would say for the most part, other than maybe
They're almost
one.
anonymous.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
scared to treat people poorly when they have to look them in the eye.
I don't disagree with that at all. The reason I suggest here, that we have that discussion there is only because I think it would be probably easier in all respects to remove the remote component of the meeting and go back to only in person, rather than trying to make sure that people know whether or not if they're remote, they
I
can
agree with
comment.
that.
I would worry about people then complaining and saying they're upset to their ward councils, for instance, that the board wasn't, taking their comments because they didn't know, and I would rather almost completely segment, just to connect from that than.
I think
use
that's
political.
What's, they're gonna take, I mean, look.
Well, I just meant the public comment. I don't care if people who could view it over Zoom.
Oh,
I just
yeah,
meant
I
the
agree.
public
Well,
comment
right,
would have to be
they can
delivered in
watch it.
person,
Yeah, they can watch it if they like.
Yeah, so.
What does the planning board
Applicants and people want to come.
So there's still the hybrid setup. They take the comments remotely. I haven't seen any of we certainly saw some of that sort of out against the beginning. We're all getting kind of used to things with the pandemic. I think things have gotten more efficient, obviously it's a little easier with us in the room. But other than city council recently, where there was one, attempt, I think it was as something to do with like the Middle East, there was something, there was some comment was made,
Two in a row.
2 in a row. It was a very brief thing.
Two Zoom bombs.
Oh, is that right?
Really
yeah.
well done. Couldn't shut it off.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Because I wasn't the host, I don't know whether that was being done quickly enough, but it was.
I kept going.
Hey, so Andy, who has the authority to make the decision on whether or not the hearings must be, people must, is that a city council?
And we have to
Is
say.
it our decision?
Because of some lack of continuity, let's say, there's some transitions, if you will, between administration, the council and so forth in recent years. I think to make sure there's no, people who are on different pages feeling it's not exactly clear that everybody would feel comfortable with change one way or the direction. And my suggestion here is just that we have that discussion with the, administration, the executive and the legislative branch, I'm not saying go to the entire city council, have a whole thing, go to committee and all that. But at least talk with the council president, just to make sure we're on the same page if we're going to make an adjustment that's perhaps different than constituents might expect at this point, or, in one way or another. Not that I'm suggesting or advocating one or the other, just because I think it would be a better, smoother transition to that than having people, upset or offended that they didn't know we were making a transition that folks might have become accustomed to in one or another. So
What's that?
I'm happy to, if you have a preference, I'm happy to convey that and do that kind of relay for us, essentially to speed it up.
I'd go
So
live
if there's a
just for
preference
safety.
for,
Just like all live,
I mean, people can listen in, but they can't talk.
yeah.
If you wanna participate, you gotta come.
You gotta, I mean, the council did it because of these people calling in and ranting and raving about Israel. And they
Well, I
had
think it was even before that, right, that they had done.
But I think, no, they did it after the second one. I said, stop, no more,
Oh.
nobody can call in.
you wanna come, if you wanna speak, you have
If you wanna
to be
speak, you have to be there, and you still get the kooks coming there. The guy was dressed up with a mask one night,
But at least he had to come in.
yeah, he came
He had to
in
come in
He
person.
had to
And he-
make the
and he
effort, so
sang-
he really wanted to
and he
make that
sang a
effort.
song. Yeah,
Was it a good song?
no, it wasn't a good song, and he was very pitchy, I thought.
Oh. That's.
Again, I think it could quite simply, and the planning board, we would defer, we had a discussion with them as well for a similar vein, but if you have a preference for going in person, doing an adjustment of sort of the middle ground there, I just caution with that, just, I hope we don't want to confuse people, I wouldn't want to confuse people and have people disgruntled that they can't,
It's confusing when Mr. Swan has to go on Zoom to hear talk to the historical commission. After coming to the senior center and saying, why is that commission private only, not like, that's confusing.
And the licensing commission is also still strictly Zoom, which is interesting and an outlier, just like historic, but I think.
Each board is entitled, there's a period of time still where they can do that,
Yeah.
so, it's up to each board to decide.
When is the period of time
I
expiring?
believe it goes to March of next year, I think.
March of 24?
I think it's either 24 or 25. I think it might actually be 25, but,
Isn't it the case, though, that most other cities and towns have gone back to live?
quite frankly, I've not been keeping track of every, don't forget, there's multiple boards in every city and town.
Yeah, no, I'm.
So I have
you're talking
not.
about the primary board.
Yeah, I'm trying, that's the thing is, I'm not, most of our other boards, like they're either back in person or remote, but, I think the combination one is obviously more difficult, certainly for Caitlin and I,
Sure,
much more
yeah,
difficult.
yeah, no,
Part of that has been the lack of, no matter how much we've tried, I've certainly advocated. We have had transitions of, IT and so forth that are quite significant, but have not been able to get better equipment in the room, so. It causes, some concern for us, the fact that the equipment can go down, causes
And
technical issues.
sometimes things get lost, people get lost too, and,
Yeah,
and so I think that
yeah.
that's a concern also. But maybe.
I guess starting with what your preference is might be a good way to go, because then we could sort of decide if we're making an adjustment. how to best
would
do
love
that
to
there.
be a person with no technology, just like it used to be throughout
Yeah.
all of human history, after the earth.
And if the board prefers that, I'm more than happy to kind of relay and say, this is the preference of the board, I have no objection to it, kind of clean up this and that, but we want to make sure that, as with the council president, I'd want to make sure that all the councilors knew that was an adjustment we're making, so that their constituents weren't saying to them at some point, we were, it went away, we didn't, everybody knows, that it's better, it's gonna function better essentially for our meetings.
How about we, as a board, let me just pitch this out there, ample notice, align it with, a natural and logical human time transition of January 1st in a new year.
Yeah.
If the board is inclined, how about we begin to signal that way, like as soon as possible, that it's our inclination that we'd like to do that as of January 1st, and then it's a logical thing.
I think that makes
I
sense.
would only say,
Sorry.
when will those licensing things start coming in?
They're not gonna come until next year.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
Would
Sure.
that get us back to the city hall or?
No, that's it. No, and quite frankly, I think that's gone now. I mean, we can, Rob and I, we can talk about that with.
that's been like I
Yeah,
have no idea like why we've been banished.
I have brought it up a couple of times.
Great respect to this one
Subcommittees like the room.
Keep in mind that the number of subcommittee meetings has increased since we were booted from the council chambers, the number of committee meetings has gone up. So the likelihood, because they now want to make sure they can do all their committee meetings on different nights and sometimes have flexibility with that room, it's the only room they can guarantee themselves as councilors. Because they have care and custody of that room. It's part of the reason why I don't think that's likely to be, changed, but you can revisit it, but I think it's a separate question.
To your point, Rob, I would just amend the thought. I mean, I think as a nod towards transparency, I would be comfortable with our hearings to be on Zoom. If people want to watch them as spectator sport,
Right, but if
Fine,
participation.
but participation, applicants, their representatives, and any person who wants to speak must appear before us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically we treat this Zoom just like it would be for media, where it can be streamed,
Correct,
but you
yes.
just watch.
So it's not, so it doesn't sever people from the ability to be informed and participate.
Right, and the transparency is
Yeah.
maintained.
And see everything, even if they can't get into a car.
Yeah, yeah.
And come.
Well, I think the Zoom bombing thing, the lack of, I would say adequate equipment to really be able to do this effectively and know that it's not gonna be to go down, Those are all good reasons, I think, to go back to just a,
This is-
person.
This is apropos, and I feel like in the, sort of in the wake of the, you know, the sort of tidal special permits that we're about to start to hear, this is a good time to say,
Yeah,
because of that velocity, because of that volume, we are making an anticipated, we're taking an anticipatory action toward streamlining the process by which we conduct the business of the city vis-a-vis the zoning board of appeals, in the interest of, you know, administrative economy and time, respect to all of those who choose to or elect to participate, without severing anyone who chooses to or elects to observe. We have decided to go with a singular strategy of participation equals presence. On-site, live, and you can still observe and follow along just like you used to be able to, you know, and like most every city and town can, you can log on and watch any city board hearing, you should be. But if you wish to participate, I think we are doing ourselves a great service and the public a great service as we try to onboard this new velocity of time demands that will be coming as a result, direct result of the short-term rental units.
It's a good excuse.
So I think, like, let's start to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that right now. And
that's helpful to us because
Yeah.
it's, knowing where you wanna go.
And it's a
is great.
soft immersion, and it's a
Yeah.
soft landing, and we'd like to signal to the counselors and the mayor with their input, of course, and with their hopeful, you know, courtesy and assent, or at least no objection.
Yeah.
that As of January first, we'd like to begin, fresh and anew with this,
Definitely.
as we sort of like, you know, barrel headlong toward all of these special permits, and we sort of get our, you know, get our ceilings.
Yep.
Because I think that's gonna be good for us, I think that it will cut a whole segment out of the, you know, let's check the room, now let's check online, and I miss somebody, and then I stare, as you all do, to like, you know, the hand that's up and it's passed, you know, I can't, there's no gesturing able to be done, and we're left with the, you know, with the byproduct of someone feeling, you know, disenfranchised, even though it's not our intent. You know what I mean, so I think it's a great solution for you guys, like, to sort of collaborate, we just went through. It took some time to do it. I think that's an improvement on how we do our business.
Just one question, and I ask only as to the board members, if a board member, or let's say hypothetically several board members, because, you know, it comes to one of those quorum things, being able to vote and have a meeting. If board members are not able to be somehow in the room, do you want to be able to maintain board members' ability to connect, or versus
No, I
going
think
back?
I think we have to be all in or all out.
No, I just wanna make sure.
Hold ourselves
Thank you.
accountable to the same rules, you know,
Okay.
I don't think we can credibly position ourselves,
Sure.
you know, and pass the straight face test,
Sure.
nor should we be able to. Like, I think that it's what is, you know, what we hold the public, you know, accountable to, we hold ourselves accountable to, and it just, and the chips fall where they fall. You know?
Great, thank you.
Okay. Do you guys agree? I mean, that's just my synthesis.
Yeah.
Really well synthesized.
That's what I tell students now, if you're absent, you missed it, there's no recording.
Like, and at the end of the day, you know,
Okay.
it's we live in a physical world, and it is a show to go culture, by and large, and technology helps us alleviate the, you know, the bottlenecks in that regard, but it should never be a substitute for personal engagement, especially when it comes to like business that's a business of collaboration, interaction, engagement. I think it's just a better
I
result.
just wanna make one comment, which is I just spent 2.5 hours watching a Zoom only meeting with the historic commission. And it was painful. They didn't turn on their cameras, so they couldn't talk to each other. They had no idea who, what to say, what or anything. And it was, I gotta tell you, this board did a much better job in going through the COVID era. I'm proud of what we did. And, you know, it wasn't anywhere near as painful as what I did.
Yeah, you know,
This is 2 years after COVID.
Yeah, I think it's great. So, with nothing further, thank you all for that. Motion to adjourn. So moved. All right, all those in favor, aye. Aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, guys. Yeah, Andy, let's